It is January the 1st, 2023. Anybody had bets? I was going to say 2022. Cash them in. I'm going to be your host tonight. I'm Durnford, and I'm also known as the nuclear proctologist. And in the nuclear industry, I'm known as the Gamma Goat. You can call in at 709-589-4406. Hope everybody's doing good on this. The beginning of the year just seems amazing, don't it? Just seems amazing that here we are at the beginning of the year. And we got a shitload of news to get through. I hope everybody had a great new year, if that's possible. Welcome, everybody. Yeah, so we're going to cover the last days of 2022 and today's news cycle, and we got a lot of it, 700 I think it is, to get through. When it's uncomfortable, even when it's unpopular, even when it's dangerous to speak the truth, it's the precise time the truth should be spoken. We got a poll with 291 gigawatts of renewables and 0.4 gigawatts of nuclear power was added in 2022. So in other words, there was almost 600 times more renewables than nuclear added. Is that proof the nuclear power is dying? And we got somebody there. Says my no vote, they done the same thing on the last video, is not a nuclear endorsement, but just pragmatic observation of the situation. Well, if that's true, how can you deny 600 to 1 in production? How can you say that that's not the dying of the nuclear power industry? It is. So just try to split hairs and vote no for that. I think is worries me when I see people do stuff like that. There was another guy who used to do that not that long ago. Turned out that he was pro-nuclear. How can anybody pro-nuclear vote no to the facts? I don't know. Or anti-nuclear, or pro-life, I should say. You can call in at 709-589-4406. I'd like to hear your reasons in reality. So, United Nations is the curse of Earth. And Eisenhower called them the military-industrial complex. If you're not familiar with it, you can come by and read that after. And George W. Bush called them the New World Order. They have the world's media at full speed trying to deceive you, but still, there was 600 to 1 in energy added was renewables, not nuclear. But the propaganda machine is alive and well. I posted a picture in my community tabs on the front page of Hanford from the 50s had dumped 450 billion gallons. 450 billion gallons. It's 1.8 trillion liters, which works out to a 6-foot wide by 520-foot tall aquarium of nuclear liquids wrapped around the entire planet. Imagine a wall 6 feet wide, 520 feet tall, wrapped around the entire planet. That's just a fraction what a single country dumped at a single place. Each liter is lethal for 1 million years. If you take a liter and put it into a restaurant, it'll kill everybody there in 20 minutes. It'll continue to do that for millions of years. There's 1.8 trillion liters dumped into the soil. Down, everything downhill is to the Columbian River. Georgia. Hello, Georgia. You're alive. Where are you?
Hi, Dana. This is Chelsea MP.
Hi, Chelsea. How are you?
Well, I'm doing all right, I guess.
At least you're honest.
I had to get Skype just to call you.
Oh, my goodness. Bless your heart.
My regular number wouldn't go through.
I feel privileged. Thank you. Go. You got something you'd like to add before I keep cutting you off here?
Yeah. So, why is the nuclear industry dying? I mean, it's building like a new plant here in Georgia, and they're building this mega structure in the UK.
Yep.
How's it dying, Dana?
Okay.
I mean,
well,
is it capable of dying? I thought it was like a demon force.
No. Okay. No, I hear you. It's loud and clear. So, between 2020 and 2026, there's 200 or 480 gigawatts of renewables will come online. And we're actually on schedule for that to happen. So in 2027, 2028, 2029, this is going to steamroll. So what you're seeing is a fake.
Anymore.
You're seeing, yeah, you're seeing a fake.
Renewables in the mix to use.
So the reactors that are online to be built, actually, as far as I can tell, won't be built, and that the ones that might say be built because of military-industrial complex will be bombarded by reality from the communities. They can't deny it by 2026. And by 2027, 2028, 2029, you can imagine how much more this is going to accelerate in the renewable industries. And they figure by 2050, half the planet will run on geothermal. Because once geothermal takes off, it doesn't need no storage. So, yeah, I can't put everything into the poll, right, obviously. But for those who visit me regularly, they should. I hope anyway that I have articulated that enough times. But
very well, it makes sense. But I don't think it's like
I hear you.
Gonna go away without kicking and screaming. I think they're gonna just embezzle all the money that they're getting all these
100%.
These loans or whatever, they're getting all this money thrown at them. They're going to embezzle all that money.
Desperation,
and they're going to reform and manifest into some other form of evil, probably.
Yep, you're 100% right. Actually,
that are going to be in the mutations from all this nightmare. Because I don't think they're going to let go of nuclear weapons that easy. I think they're going to want to keep those around because they're so gung ho on those things right now. And I don't know. I think
Well, there is. I'm just going to cut you off for a second. Awesome, great points, buddy. Awesome, great points. And you got all the universities pumping for nuclear. You got all the mainstream and alternative media's pumping for nuclear. So you're right to be pragmatic about it. I just don't want to give the nuclear industry any hope. I think is my problem. I think it's a personal issue. You're right in what you're saying. I'm trying to deny the nuclear industry even a morsel of hope with what I consider reality.
I like that. I like that kind of approach.
Yeah, but you're 100% right in what you're saying, and I'm glad you called and sorted that out because I refuse to acknowledge the nuclear industry has any redeeming qualities because they don't, obviously.
Sometimes that's the best way to deal with things like this.
My
stepmother was like that, I think, back in the day when I was a teenager. No, but yes, all right. Well, take care. Have a good show. Hi, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you for calling in, by the way. God bless. Hugs. Take care now. You're welcome. Thank you. And so that was fantastic points, right? And I knew if the caller would call in, that would set me straight. But anyway, that was I like stuff like that. I'm not trying to pick a fight with somebody. I'm just like, don't give them a morsel of hope. If they're drowned and step on their heads, don't throw them a lifeline, right? That's how I see the industry. In fact, what I think you should do with the nuclear industry is spray them with DDT everywhere you see them. This is a clip, self-explanatory. This blew me away when I seen this last night. They're going around spraying DDT indoors in all the classrooms, and it's just wow kind of stuff. Because DDT is actually banned worldwide. They got away with it for a little while, and reality kicked in. But I'm going to play this couple of clips for you because I want you to have the same nightmares I had last night.
With the possibility of a serious infantile paralysis epidemic, health authorities of the city of San Antonio, Texas, attacked the germ carriers throughout the city.
Go back a second.
With the possibility of a serious infantile paralysis epidemic, health authorities of the city of San Antonio, Texas, attacked the germ carriers throughout the city. With the war-discovered DDT in special sprayers, sections of the city are blanketed with the insecticide in the fight to stop the spread of the dread poliomyelitis. Every suspected spot is sprayed.
That's some scary stuff, right? They're walking in, kids are all sat there, and this is like spraying with Agent Orange instead of from 9 miles up. They're doing it just walking right up to them, and here, suck daddy. And of course, that's all over your clothes. It gets worse. So they went to Africa with their DDT, and the government told them that it was so safe you could actually eat it, but they take it to a whole different level with their propaganda.
The medical officer explains that buildings treated with DDT remain effective against mosquitoes for about 3 months. The Africans at first are not very impressed. Some are afraid that the DDT will poison them, while others suspect some sort of witchcraft. The entomologist calls for a bowl of porridge. This is sprayed with the solution in full view of the audience. He now eats several spoonfuls of the mixture to show that the contaminated food is harmless. Even this fails to convince the audience.
Maniacs, man. Yummy! Yummy.
Arab Kipkoy is the chief spokesman.
Man. So you get a government job, and the government says to you, so safe you can eat it, go out and tell the natives. Yeah, sure, how much you paying me an hour? Well, how much do you want? Sky's the limit. Hi, everybody. So that was a great call, by the way. Thank you, Chelsea. Way to kick my ass. I appreciate it. If you're going to do it, might as well have the right ones doing it to me. Researchers push preprint reviews to improve scientific communication. Scientific communication. So we're just going to run through a typical news cycle. The ring in 2023. I'm liable to say 2021 tonight, so forgive me if I do. Even though it's not 20... You would expect me to say 2022 if I'm going to screw up, but each year we have the first show, and I seem to mess up really bad. Fraser and members of his lab focus on reviewing preprint studies that are posted online whenever authors like bypassing the journal's peer review process. We got Michael Schill calling in from Ontario. Hang on, Mike. Hello, Mike. How are you, sir?
I'm well, sir. How are you?
I'm good. I'm back up and running again. 2023. And we got 700 to get through tonight. Go ahead. You're in Ontario.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Sorry?
I said, you're just reminding everybody you're in Ontario, home of tritiated fresh water.
This is part of why I called, obviously. So first I wanted to say Happy New Year to you and all the good people here. And secondly, I wanted to say why I wanted to know was, our Ontario government is deep in bed with the pro-nuclear lobby group, and as you know, and
vicious
they're
thugs.
bringing
Yeah.
on. Sorry?
They're vicious thugs in Ontario, eh? The nuclear industry.
I mean,
They're cowards,
when,
but they're thugs.
when a lot of the rest of the world walks away, Ontario nuclear is still right there.
Yeah, they robbed Canada for so long. They're going to be hard to get rid of them, and the truth comes out, it'll be really easy. But right now, it's hard. Is there anything else you want to throw out there? Go ahead.
Yeah, because we're being told now here in Ontario that the electric cars are really being pushed through, and we know the batteries are nuclear waste, I assume. And also to charge them, I think that's a very pro-nuclear idea, is to have these charging stations that, millions of people are going to plug into, and they want that to be nuclear supplied.
Right. They pushed that for quite a few years now.
Yeah, and now I think they're really coming close to actually mandating that all Ontarians have to have electric vehicles.
Right.
I think they're very close to doing that.
Well, originally, not originally, but over the last decade, electric cars started becoming more realistic. But originally, 70% of new electric vehicle owners were what we typically describe as yuppies, part of the industry itself, right? And so that was part of this hype train to promote nuclear, was to mention the electric cars and saying, we're going to need a lot more electricity, we better get more nuclear, because only nuclear can guarantee us our electric cars. And so a lot of people have there's a word for it when it comes to electric cars. It's, people don't trust it, and so they have a lot of anxiety about range anxiety, I think it is they call it, or something like that. Okay, Mike, was there anything else? We got an amazing amount to get through here tonight. Keep her going, though.
Yeah, so I just want to, reinforce the idea that I think they're going to mandate that we have to have these electric vehicles in the next few years. And just
they are 100%, and then they're going to use nuclear.
Yep.
As a justification for more nuclear will be the fact we need more power, when power can be supplied other ways, obviously. But the nuclear industry, that's a program. That's an important part of their brainwashing for some reason. We've been watching it for at least 6 years heavily. Okay, my friend, we'll let you go.
All right, good night.
Thank you. Now. Yeah, bye-bye. And so Ontario, where Mike is from, they captured Canada because Ottawa is up there, right? They captured it a long time ago. Yeah, and somebody mentioned, or James was mentioning, Boris Johnson drinking a can of peach juice from Fukushima a couple of years ago. I happen to know where that clip was, or that picture was, so I brought it up. Because Boris Johnson, of course, we've had polls, should Boris Johnson be charged with crimes against humanity for removing all restrictions on the food from the nuclear wasteland for babies and cereal, for baby food and cereals, which is what children eat, of course, 2.5 years ago. And this year, before he stepped down, he removed it for adults, and they were bragging how they look forward to having it in corner stores. So back to that story to improve, unless somebody wants to call in. 709-589-4406. I'll leave it up there for a second for you. Critiquing preprints offer big advantages over traditional journal-based peer review. So they're talking about publishing studies without it being peer-reviewed, which is basically what they've been doing all along, right? And having an open platform to publish it on. And if they regurgitate the typical propaganda, then it's more likely to be accepted without the peer reviews. 180,000 preprints posted on biomedical research. You can imagine what the nuclear industry is like. Small nuclear reactor project won't need extra assessments. Canada's Ottawa says. So they're saying that the small modular reactors meets the same qualification as the large reactors, but that's simply not true, right? The releases from these are astronomical. There's new rules involved, therefore that should be applicable. They're going to be using mixed oxide fuel if they actually pull one of them off. They still don't have one. Right now, these are fairy tales. These are unicorns that don't actually exist. Nuclear power radioactive waste to be buried in UK plant. So they changed the rules so they can actually bury nuclear waste at the plant. The site of a former nuclear power station. Rather than why not move it to a holding site like Sellafield. She's so proud. She's the spokesperson. Why would you can't remediate the site if you're going to bury nuclear waste on it? Or is that the point? You're going to remediate it and the nuclear waste is going to be there. And then you got the interviewed morons from the communities who said, yeah, as long as it's safe. Well, it's absurd to acquiesce like that. We're talking about nuclear is hemorrhaging into your community all the time, and it has been for its entire... The fuel pools are still there. Biden appoints a UNR professor to the nuclear waste panel. So Sam Bristol got arrested, former nuclear waste, and now they replaced him with a notorious mouthpiece for the nuclear industry. A notorious propaganda apologist for the nuclear industry. SKB receives environmental permits for final repository extension. This is the Swedish. They're going to bury it under the ocean. When it melts down, because it will melt down in the future. It's going to melt down in the future. It might be 100 years, might be 500 years, might be 7 years. One of those is going to melt down. One of them is going to give up the ghost. They know that. That's why they're building it so deep, right? What happens is if any water shows up or it hits water expands 1,800 feet per cubic or per liter. It'll crack the earth and then the ocean will pour in. But see, the chain reaction doesn't need water or oxygen. That's what makes the chain reaction so crazy. And once it starts burning at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, it's going to ignite the other nuclear waste. And if you're going to put all your high-level waste, it's all going to, at some point, catch fire. And at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, it will chew. It will. So even if you don't reach water, it's still going to cannibalize all the rocks above it. And if the rocks fall down on it, it's not going to stop the chain reaction. You're not going to throw dirt over it and smother it. It's going to consume that too. The gases will detonate because you'll build up of hydrogen, and that'll detonate the earth. And eventually it'll work its way up till it's in the water. And eventually that ocean is going to be hemorrhaging a plume of radiation that can't be denied and will exterminate any future species that survive the current extinction. And that's in Sweden, I believe, is it? Yeah, Sweden's reactor. It's so insane that they're going to build it under the ocean. And look at this pristine, beautiful spot that they're going to destroy permanently. The industry really got some... It really does hate humans and hate the species. And it seems to do everything it can and revels in destruction. Malaysia and Ghana on the forefront of a borehole. So they're going to dig a hole in the ground and put their radioactive waste down there. And the IAEA is out there gloating that somehow this is great. Well, that's not a solution, though. Really, just bury it like you've already been doing that. That's the problem. You've been doing it for 80 years, just burying it wherever you want. Now you're calling it a borehole or a deep geological repository. You're still just burying it in the ground. You're not coming up with solutions, and you're not containing it. Everything is hemorrhaging into the environment, and then using the ocean, like for the United Kingdom wants to do the same thing. On top of that, Finland is doing the same thing. Now Sweden's doing the same thing. For countries putting it under the ocean. This is their oh shit plan. This is what he built them over aquifers, by the way, because you know they're going to melt down at some point. At some of these places, they want the water underneath it to try to contain it, to keep it cool, or just to destroy the planet. It seems more realistic. For countries with limited amount of radioactive waste, disposal could theoretically involve safe, secure, and permanent placement inside of boreholes deep underground. Yeah, but don't go putting it in the communities. Don't stick it in prime farmland. Don't put it where it's going to end up, over aquifers and places like that and under oceans. You're just asking, and if you keep doing it, you're going to have exactly what we're talking about happen. Like they say, WIP was going to be a perfect spot, but it wasn't in 2014 and therever after. They had a meltdown. They covered it up. They claimed it was a truck fire, and they spent $6 billion to clean up a truck fire, a salt truck, which was only a tire. They showed a picture of a tire caught fire and abandoned it for 10 days, and then they couldn't go back because now all of a sudden they had radiation. Inside Project Blue Peacock, Project Blue Peacock, the most outrageous nuclear plot of the entire Cold War. Well, the most outrageous plot was the nuclear war they had. You call it nuclear testing, but it was a nuclear war. It's the same radioactive fallout. A nuclear landmine. Try wrapping your mind around it. And they were going to use live chickens to stop it from freezing. Try making that up on your own. And they only wanted to last 8 days in case the Soviet Union invaded Germany. They were going to have nuclear landmines that were full of chickens. And they were going to put food and water there to keep the chickens alive for 8 days. But after 8 days, they didn't give a shit. The industry's insane, right? They decided not to do it because one of them had pains of conscience. I don't know. Who knows? We'll never know. Rental needed. Term 300,000 years. This is somebody wants. I hope this is some kind of joke. Rental needed at the time of nuclear waste, and they want to rent it for 300,000 years to store nuclear waste here. Radioactive fuel rods from Indian Point nuclear power plant. As soon as you turn, they've been dumping it in the river that heads out to the Atlantic for how many decades again? Charles Gale and Darrell Haggard, honored by the Canadian Associations of Physicists. Again, these are nuclear proliferating machines. These are typically, these people are unbelievably dysfunctional. They were ostracized from whatever community they grew up in because they were completely dysfunctional. A lot of them are perpetual alcoholics and serial abusers. And they wouldn't leave university, kept getting degree after degree. They're so dysfunctional. And then eventually nuclear industry says, oh, we got a weirdo savant. That's what these people are. These are weirdo savants. And the industry seeks them out and then puts them in positions of authority. But if you were trying to have a conversation with them, it wouldn't take you long to back off and leave. Artificial intelligence chatbots. Great. Exciting breakthrough or dangerous tool. Apparently they're so realistic, but if you engage them, then they'll start saying weird shit, apparently, right? You can trick them. But how long before they get over that? How long before they rewrite the codes? It's not that hard for them. They can hire 1,000 engineers. They can hire 10,000 engineers like they do for operating systems if they really want to conquer it. And they have no problem getting the money. Shame on you, Prime Minister, for your blatant about-face. We're talking about the Japan's Prime Minister promoting nuclear. The most resource-intensive, and it's a disease factory. This is Nami, I think. Yeah, Nami. You see all the buildings and properties tore down. because of radiation. The rest of them should be gone too, obviously. The town of Nami. And Nami, unbelievably radioactive wasteland. They told people in 2017 it was safe to live back there, but it can't be. Like, there's 14 of prefectures in Japan are nuclear wastelands. That's forever. You can fill up 1 trillion bags, you still can't get rid of the radiation. It's still melting down, it's still hemorrhaging out, and there was a lot of it, right? That's the thing about nuclear meltdown, it's a perpetual disease factory forever on a level that's hard to comprehend. And so are fuel pools. A single fuel pool on the planet Earth is catastrophic for the entire planet and every species. We have 1,000 of them. Why Japan is plotting a nuclear renaissance? Who's going to build the reactors, first off, for Japan? The workforce has been offline for 10 years. Many of them took an early retirement. The new generation really doesn't want nothing to do with it. They can pretend it does, but they don't. Who are they going to get to build it? South Korea is making promises. Russia's made all kinds of promises. A few other companies are making the promises, but they don't even have the supply chain that can handle just Sizewell. And Sizewell is a greedy plant. It's the biggest construction job period on the entire planet. And it can't fulfill its work orders. It can't get the equipment. So how is Japan going to do a nuclear renaissance? Really, this is just the power of the nuclear industry. The prime minister of the country has to go out and pump for the industry. You don't get elected unless you're going to pump for the industry. And South Korea done the same thing where they elected a vehemently pro-nuclear prime minister or president in South Korea. But again, they acknowledge they don't have the supply chain, they don't have the workforce, they don't have the technicians, and it takes a long time to train them. And you're talking 4 to 10 years, depending on what part of the construction crew, you need at least 4 years' work to be proficient. So there is no nuclear renaissance because those administrations will be taken down in the next couple of years. The next administration will come to its senses because renewables are now undeniable to anybody with half a brain cell. And these people are going to know the statistics. They're going to say, what's the statistics? The statistics are 600 to 1. 600 times renewables compared to a single nuclear 100 or 1,000 megawatts. No, it's not even 1,000, 500, not even 500, it's 400 megawatts last year versus 290 gigawatts of renewables. And they haven't even scratched the surface with geothermal. When Japan is plotting a nuclear renaissance, 11 years after the disaster, it's still melting down. The industry is, first off, Japan is on the rim of fire, right? They're very close to the magma. They have lots of volcanoes active volcanoes, for instance. And so they're perfect for geothermal. But the nuclear industry is so firmly entrenched in the diet and administrations and the media that they're willing to sacrifice the country for something they actually don't need. For CBC News, why is CBC News here in Canada, the government has been captured by the nuclear industry, right? They're weaponized against the population. But Japan is firmly anti-nuclear. It's just a tiny fraction that's actually pro-nuclear. And that's not a renaissance. And this scares the shit out of me. Biden is among just 9 people with the power to destroy all life on Earth. Well, nobody should have that kind of power. It's absurd that a single person would have that power. It's absurd that anybody could have that kind of power. There should be a referendum. U.S. spending bill passes, more money for Hanford. And so I posted, and I'll bring it up for you to try to break it down, hopefully. And so I'd done the math on this over and over and over, and I kept saying to myself, that can't be freaking true. And I'll bring it up for you. So I done the math. 450 billion gallons of radioactive liquids was dumped into the soil in just the first decade or something like that. First 2 decades, say. I'll be polite and say 2 decades. 450 billion gallons is 1.8 trillion liters. 1.8 trillion liters at 1,000 liters per ton is 1,800,000,000 tons. 1,800,000,000 tons. A ton of liquid is 6 feet by 6 feet by 6 feet. Is equals to 10,800,000,000 feet. 10,800,000,000 feet divided by 5,000 feet. 5,000 feet is a mile. Is 2,160,000 miles. 2,160,000 miles divided by the circumference of Earth is 25,000 miles around the planet, right? Would equal 86 rows of 1-ton bags right around the entire planet, 86 rows. And each liter in each bag, there's 1,000 liters in each bag. So if you took a single bag, 1,000 liters, distributed out 1,000 liters to, pinch points around the planet, like subways and bus stations and major thoroughfares, everybody walked past it every day for 1,000,000 years is going to die from it. This is very dangerous for very long periods of time. But if you took a 6 foot wide by 6 foot by 6 foot container of 1,000 liters of lethal radioactive waste by the liter and stacked it 86 rows high, it still wraps around the planet. So now you got a 500 and so now you got a wall of 1-ton bags of deadly radioactive water. Each bag got 1,000 liters, is 6 feet wide by 6 feet tall. So that's 508. That's 50-story high. 518 feet tall around the entire planet Earth. That's just from one area, just one place. All the national laboratories done similar. China done it, India done it, Pakistan done it. You can be sure. This is catastrophic numbers we're talking about. This is holy shit stuff we're talking about. This is horrifying numbers we're actually acknowledging. And I put that up on my front page so you can just pinch it and post it on Instagram or Facebook or just get it out there, right? What have I got done here? We got a poll. I always get... the polls are meant to tell the story. So with 291 gigawatts of renewables in 2021, and there's only 0.4 gigawatts of nuclear added, is that proof nuclear power is dying? Well, it is proof that they're dying. It's not proof that they're dead, right? I'm not claiming they're dead, and I'm not claiming they're going to be completely dead, but it is dying, right? That is definitely dying. It doesn't mean they're dying in a nuclear. Could be 80 years before it goes away. But the problem with that theory was that renewables are so much more efficient, so much more effective, so much cheaper every single year. And by 2026, we're going to curb stomp all gas, oil, coal, nuclear combined with 4,800 gigawatts of renewables in a 6-year period. That's not going to stop in 2027, 2028, 2029. It's going to accelerate. And so the current administration might promote nuclear and throw money at it, but that's all they're doing. It's not tenable, see? And smarter minds will prevail, you know? That's my opinion only, I guess. I like to think it's an educated opinion because I live, breathe, and eat this nonsense, this disgusting industry. So the Hanford, by the way, wants another $670 billion. And 90% of all the money goes to administration. And I'm not making it up. I'm not misrepresenting it. 90% of the money goes to administration. It's 580 square miles. I'm only talking about a little section where they dumped it in the soil, folks. That goes into the Columbia River, so a lot of that was boiled off, just evaporated into the communities. They got 41 miles of unlined trenches there also that they dump nuclear waste into. That's above the 450 billion gallons. So when you do the math on that, holy smokerooey, we need an ESCOM state of emergency, an ESCOM. Every time I see any kind of picture of nuclear power plants, I get upset. Cape Town, does our government have a plan for dealing with the power crisis? We're going to leave? No. And so that place should have been shut down in South Africa. It should have been shut down and closed quite a couple of years ago. But they didn't build anything to replace it, and so they can't shut it down. It's built on a fault line, so it's not big earthquakes, but they're constant. And then they used inferior steel and cement, and that's suffering heavily from neutron bombardments, which is known as a Wigner effect, where the cement and the steel of these pressurized 1,000 plus PSI reactors has become brittle, and also known as imbrittle. Some people get upset because I don't call it imbrittle. I'm sorry. You got any idea how fast the hamsters are running inside of my poor head all the time? These suits can't protect you, by the way. And if you work at Hanford for a single 8-hour shift, you're entitled to a pension, and you don't got to prove that working at Hanford made you sick. In other words, it's impossible not to get sick from working at Hanford, but it could take a decade or two for it to manifest or be diagnosed, and you might die before that. And there's 1,800 illnesses. NuScale completes a small reactor design guide, step 1, close to construction. Again, this is a fable. It's a complete fable that they're close to construction. And look at where it came from, Video Game News. And the lies they told were really something. Close to construction is one of the biggest ones, obviously. The countries of Eastern Europe, Canada, and a number of others show their interest in the atomic energy reactors. Who writes like that? With the publication of documentation, construction is free. Well, no. The major component of the reactors can be fabricated almost entirely at the plant instead of on site. There's another fable. And greatly speeds construction and commissioning. No, it doesn't, because it doesn't exist. Like the Canadians don't even have a design into the regulatory agencies. They'll get rubber stamped, but it still takes 4 or 5 years. With good cost control. Again, fable. But this is a video magazine promoting nuclear to the children that will visit this disgusting site with terrible, terrible authors. The Koreans are ready to stamp NuScale reactor vessel on mass basis. No. That's absolutely deceit and dishonest. That promises to reduce the cost of the global cost. No, economy of scale is not applicable for small modular reactors. This is why they built the big reactors originally. Duh. The propaganda, like it's alive and well for 2023. PNM surprised by approval of battery storage project. Surprised is the key word here. We're surprised. We said we'd like to put in batteries, and they said, sure, here's all the money you want. If you want to put in geothermal, you're not getting a nickel. Oh, it's Albuquerque. Oh, so they're going to sabotage it, right? Christmas bombing. 200 nuke bombers loaded with 20,000 tons of bombs conducted one of the biggest air raids in history. 20,000 tons of bombs. 20,000 times 2,000 pounds a ton is 40 million pounds of bombs. Who made all the money in that war, I wonder? The heaviest ever aerial bombing on Christmas Day, nearly 60 years ago, 50 years ago, 200 U.S. Genocide machines, B-52 mass murderers, dropped over 20,000 tons of bombs on North Vietnam. Now, if you look up the Gulf of Tonkin was staged, you might come across a Harvard presentation from Harvard University site, Harvard. And I remember I was using the site one day and this video popped up. It was the captain that was allegedly attacked in Vietnam that started the war. It's known as the Gulf of Tonkin incident, where the Vietnamese allegedly attacked an American warship that shouldn't have been in their waters, in their harbor in the first place. And they got on public television and said, we're going to go and stand with our boys. We're going to let them get slaughtered by the Vietnamese. It turned out the Vietnamese didn't attack the ship. The ship never sunk. Nobody was actually hurt. And if anybody was shooting, it was at a whale because nobody attacked them. That was a Harvard speech. I caught it like 20 minutes after it showed up. And they sprayed Agent Orange over that country. You call it chemtrailing. That's the original brutal. There's other ones before, but that was the worst up to that point. It was 9 years of spraying Agent Orange to defoliage the forest where the Viet Cong were hiding, they said. But they defoliaged the entire country. It was collective punishment. And currently, at any given time, even right now, there's around 3 million children with severe disabilities because of the Agent Orange. They killed every insect in the country. And they slaughtered it on Christmas Day of all days. So, like, if you want to know how miserable your military-industrial complex, your military machines actually are, imagine 9 years of chemtrails, of the worst thing imaginable, Agent Orange, and bombing women and children to try to get the government to submit. So when you think about wars, they're not going to attack each other because then you got nobody to fight. They're going to attack you to try to make the government submit. Because if they attack each other, then there's nobody to fight anymore, and the war machine doesn't need to make any more bombs. You can't have that. Smart water meters can prevent your bills from soaring to $1,500 a month due to leaks. So United Kingdom, you got to pay for your water in a lot of places down there. The water's free, but this is a way of gouging you, and they do. And you want to use smart meters, so you better put it in or we're going to rob you. Oh, by the way, you got to pay for the installation yourself. 1 in 4 older Britons could lose state pension under think tank recommendation. Think tank. Every time I hear the word think tank, I just who they gonna wreck right this time? The United Nations is basically a think tank too, right? Yeah. Who are they gonna? Hi, everybody. Now, I know I wasn't supposed to do the show tonight, but I couldn't handle it, so I done the show. I got too much to catch up to. We're never going to catch up on it. With 291 gigawatts of renewables last year and only 0.4 gigawatts of nuclear power added, is that proof that nuclear power is dying? Again, there's a strong argument it's going to be hard to get rid of nuclear. I get that. But it's not going to gain very much. And the weapon production that needs tritium every 12 years for its weapons. And it needs fission, right? But there's a lot of pressure anyway for the planet to come to its senses. Whether it does or not, I have no concept. I can't really say. But it is proof they're dying, but it's not proof that they're going to disappear completely, obviously. But the renaissance is not here. I think that's what I should have put there, is it proof there's no nuclear renaissance instead of dying. War in Ukraine eclipses opposition to Japan's nuclear policy shift. So the war in Ukraine, which is not a war, it's NATO. NATO's got in a war with Russia, and Ukraine is the buffer, right? And NATO's 28 countries. It was created because of the Soviets. So when the Soviets were dissolved, NATO should have been dissolved. And we've heard this narrative a lot in the last 9-10 months, right? This is what caused the inflation worldwide. But Russia just sold its commodities to somebody else. You didn't hurt Russia. And this was done by United Nations, the zombie countries of United Nations. There's 195 zombie countries. In a major policy shift, Prime Minister doesn't sit there and make up his mind. The secretary tells him what to say. He's the guy who gets his picture taken and a handshake. He's not the actual power structure. The Prime Minister is not Dr. Evil. He's Dr. Idiot, Dr. Useful Idiot. Decided Thursday to allow nuclear reactors operate beyond their current limit of 60 years. In a place with massive tsunamis and thousands of earthquakes, serious ones each year. Suffering, and they're claiming they're going to build it, but he's going to be out of the administration. They get fired within 2 or 3 years at best, right? Or they quit. When was the last time a prime minister in Japan? Well, Shinzo Abe, I guess, but he was vicious pro-nuclear. There was nothing too evil for him to do, but he wasn't crazy enough to call for a renaissance. And he was batshit crazy. He poisoned the whole planet with radioactive food from a nuclear wasteland. 11 years post-Fukushima, Japan won't back down from nuclear energy. So you see this bizarre posturing from the media? It's really a big challenge is choosing a nuclear career in Japan. Do you know they see him wearing the idiot get-ups? This was 7 years after. It's 2018. But they only went in there for a quick, got a few pictures and left again, never went back. It took them 7 years to get inside the control room, which is off far away from the reactors. But they were inside the nuclear meltdown, they said, by 2013, and everything was really tidy, according to Helen Caldicott. Of course, it's not. You can't just rebuild a nuclear meltdown, for God's sakes. So we covered this story last week. She took the job despite her parents' concern. They asked me if I would work at Fukushima. They actually explained to him that it wouldn't affect my health. That's a good little slave right there, isn't it? I can work at multiple nuclear meltdowns and it can't affect my health. That's probably what these journalists were saying. Look, we're at reactor 4, but it actually looks like that over there. They're just pumping for the industry, right? They're just subhuman. They're pretty despicable, but we've come to expect that. This is not something new to me or you, obviously. There is no role for nuclear in New York's future energy mix. Ooh, they're going to get fired, whoever that was. You can't say no to nuclear. The hell is wrong with you? You really think you can get off with that one? New York cannot rely on nuclear to reach its climate goals. Like every time I hear the word climate goal, I'm humiliated to call myself a human. Nuclear is not a climate solution. They show you these. There's so many better depictions of the radioactive fallout where it covers the whole planet in 16 days. No, not going to show that. Japan Reconstruction Agency, South China Morning Post. Is Japan's prefecture products and tourism are back on their feet more than a decade after the triple disaster. It was 4 reactors that blew up and caught fire and blew up. There was 8 fuel pools that caught fire and blew up and caught fire. They're all perpetual meltdowns. You're talking at least 20 nuclear reactor cores melting down and disappearing. But this story from South China Morning Post, which is a major Chinese government, is a paid post by the Japan Fukushima Degenerate Reconstruction Agency. Which is why I'm probably censored so much tonight on this particular video. And the propaganda is real in this one. Ensure the world that the prefecture is safe as a travel destination and a source of food product. No, just because it looks pretty don't mean it's safe. You got multiple nuclear reactors still melting down. It caused panic as far as ways the coast of U.S. and Canada. Hang on. You covered the whole planet in radioactive fallout, for goodness sakes. This model is 19 days. We got lots of models. 19 days in the corner, the planet is covered in radioactive fallout. Not maybe, not almost, not perhaps. The studies, here's another. That one's the Norwegian Institute of Air Research, I believe. This one is the model from the plutonium-239 dispersal from TEPCO. So, wastewater discharge from nuclear power plant into the Pacific Ocean. So this is about promoting a fable. It never stopped hemorrhaging into the oceans. It never stopped hemorrhaging into the environment, airborne too, see? Although screening in the weeks following meltdowns found no adverse health effects related to radiation exposure in 195,345 people. Really? You got that number right down to that, do you? It was actually 450,000 people ran away. They whittled it down to less than 200 within a couple of years. It did not stop speculation that a nuclear accident might have long-term impact, not just in Japan, but also around the world. Well, not maybe, it did. Meltdowns at 3 reactors, meltdowns at 4 reactors. They were changing the fuel and doing maintenance in reactor 4. They don't take all the fuel out of the reactor core, and it has 2 fuel pools at the top of the buildings. Bear with me. It always takes me a few seconds to get up to brutal speed. Well, here's the 2 original pictures, the first month, say, right? Reactor 3 to your right and reactor 4 to your left. These are completely destroyed symmetrically. If you don't resolve it within the first couple of hours, you run away, and that's what they've done. Leaking radiation. Does it look like it leaked out of there or detonated and hemorrhaged into the environment? That's okay. Potatoes. Well, it's nuclear, so it matters. To this day, doubts continue to persist over whether it's safe to visit. It's not safe to visit. How can it be safe? Despite many areas of the prefecture being declared decontaminated, well, you can declare it all you want, but you only worked on 3% of Fukushima prefecture. Food was banned in 14 prefectures by 55 countries, not just Fukushima. And you only cleaned up 3%, and you can't actually prove you've done that much. So it's common knowledge that the industry is insane. So that whole thing, there are 80 farmers I contracts with immediately after the earthquake and the meltdowns. Now, just mention earthquake, don't bother with the meltdown. They tested all the crops, the farmers were reassured, and they resumed farming in a nuclear wasteland. But does that mean it was safe? No. This was how immediately they got the farmers back to work, despite the meltdown was still ongoing. They shipped the food to Canada because 55 countries banned it. Canada lifted all restrictions after 93 days. 55 countries kept it for over a decade. There's still 20 countries that have a ban on it. Not Canada. So they couldn't ship it anywhere, basically, only Canada, and they did. So everybody in Canada is sick because of this. They might not know it, but it'll show up. You can't avoid it. They poison us all. And then the power plants in Ontario made sure we couldn't survive it. We loaded our stock of goods of radioactive disease factories onto trucks and went to Tokyo shopping area to sell them. So they went to Tokyo, sold the radioactive food, the most radioactive food at the worst possible time, brought it all the way to Tokyo, poisoned them, and bought supplies for the victims that were too stupid, too complacent, or too manipulated to leave. It's really something. And so they had a poll. I'm going to take you through everything. We covered the poll on my last show. We got seriously censored, like freak out type of censor. And the poll, I went and took the poll. The poll was very, very nosy poll. I wanted all your personal information. Please let us know where you live. Has Fukushima recovered? Now, they had a story. I just read you a tiny fraction of the story of the propaganda. Then they wanted you to take the poll and see if you changed your mind, right? Have you changed your mind now? You'll see that throughout the poll. Has your intentions changed? Has your intentions increased or decreased? Not yes, not no's, but did the propaganda make you complacent? That's what the poll was all about. Did you change your mind after reading the wonderful propaganda that everybody in Japan cooked up to manipulate the vulnerable parts of society, because the smart ones don't matter, see? So that was it really shows you this callousness of the industry, this contempt for humanity to do something like that. This complete contempt for themselves to take a job that was designed to manipulate and trick people eating dangerous and deadly foods, particularly the children, the most vulnerable of society. By the way, are the females. They're 4 times more vulnerable than males of all species, not just humans. Fukushima, no more than a ghost town, lures back of former residents and visitors. They're talking about Okuma, which is 2 kilometers away, 2 kilometers this way, north, of ongoing multiple nuclear meltdowns. There's no one living there. They said you can live there, but everybody's like, what, are you crazy? It's still melting down, moron. Best spots to view peach blossoms in Japan. Can you guess where? Fukushima. Ibaraki is just as big of a nuclear wasteland. So is Nagano. We don't really talk about that much anymore. We used to cover it quite a lot of years ago. The headlines from there, they abandoned all these places, by the way. They told them they can go back because they picked up some bags. Well, they picked up over 30 million one-ton bags. That you can't, but that's only 3% of the land. It was just as contaminated the very next day. You can't contain it. It's airborne, right? It's constantly hemorrhaging out. You got all kinds of meltdowns. Nagano, beautiful. It's so sad the nuclear has to destroy such beauty, right? And Guma, that's the last spot you want to be eating food from, folks. Japan's fake prime minister, the puppet, like the last, throughout history, this is what we see. Sacks the 4th minister, tie over scandalous crisis. Who are these uniformed church? So this church was involved with, Shinzo Abe got assassinated. It's one of the happiest days of the last decade for me, because he murdered so many people worldwide. It's absurd. And he was connected, his mom, the guy who allegedly killed did kill Shinzo Abe, was connected. His mom gave away everything to this church. Turns out that half the Diet is involved with the same church. Diet being like a Congress or a Parliament. It's very stunning revelation, right? It's like the Church of Scientology in Hollywood, right? There's some serious players going on there. A perfect storm for Sam Brighton. Biden's baggage thieving ex-nuclear waste guru gets mocked by Mimi as airport fills up with stranded luggage. So apparently, this is Sam you got there in the picture. He got arrested for 2 different times stealing expensive luggage. See the t-shirt he got on? He was a lunatic, poor bugger. He was a nuclear engineer, unbelievably educated, completely dysfunctional as a human, unfortunately. Another victim of the madness. Opening of Rapport nuclear power plant likely to be delayed again. Not likely, that's the norm. That's normal. What's the big deal? Nuclear is always a decade or 2 behind, or in case of Watts Bar, 4 decades. The latest tweet by Bloomberg. Disgusting Bloomberg, eh? Our worries about nuclear energy are outdated and counterproductive. No, you're outdated and counterproductive. You should be held for all the lies they told. There should be war crimes tribunals for people like that. The scourge of humanity. Part 2. Where's part 2 to? I only imported part 1. Hang on. Woe is me. We'll get there. Part 2 wasn't quite as vicious. Ooh. Yeah, hang on. Just take a second to load up. We're almost there. So at the end of last year, 2022, we were doing a recap where we were bombing through a massive amount of headlines. Tonight we're just covering the last news stories of 2022 and the first day today, January 1st of 2023. There's nasty censorship here tonight, eh? Well, that's to be expected. And not like it's going to stop me or anything. Or slow me down. Just because they're censoring me, that doesn't mean people are not watching me. It just means they're not being reflected, right? It's all good. We know this is... like last year, I had 24,200 subscribers. So with 291 gigawatts of renewables and 0.4 gigawatts of nuclear power added in 2021, is that proof of there is no nuclear renaissance? I put in the wrong thing. Give me a break, okay? And I was rushing to get the show posted, so we only had an hour before the show was posted. I didn't get it right. Don't worry, I'm just making up excuses for myself. Well, I should have asked, was there a renaissance? Was that proof there is no nuclear renaissance? But I got corrected, thank goodness, that nuclear power is not dead, is not screaming and kicking alive per se. It's not. It's pure propaganda with no substance. So it's hard to get rid of what remains, and the few they might be able to pump up. But the new reactors again that are in the pipeline, I can't see them coming to fruition. And there's over 100 reactors that started out with high hopes and they spent billions on it, but they weren't completed, right? And that's what we're going to see happening right now is the renewable renaissance is eventually going to catch on, and by 2026, there will be no doubt right? So right now they're in panic mode, and there's a lot of propaganda, and we're covering it, and it's fairly obvious that, like, because again, like I like to say that the nuclear industry doesn't have a spokesperson, right, that speaks for the industry. They got Sammy and whatever, but it's not, the World Nuclear Association, the World Nuclear News, the World or Nuclear Engineering International. These are lobbying groups. These are not a public figure that the world can say, they're a pretty good person, right? They don't have that. They have that for every other industry, but they don't have it for the nuclear industry. 84% of the educational boards in Japan conduct surveys on school rules. And so even the color of students' underwear has to be white. Who checks the children's underwear in the schools, I wonder? To make sure they got white underwear on. Japan, I don't know if you do it anymore, they used to sell vending machines all over Japan, not in the back alleys like some of the commenters were claiming, but publicly, airports and everywhere else, bus stations and subway stations. They used to sell used panties, children's panties, girls, at in vending machines in Japan. So, like, when a culture allows something like that to happen, that's a flag that everybody should be concerned about. It's just the thought of it is just bizarre. How can that possibly be a thing? But it is, and it still is. You can be sure. Just because the vending machines are no longer public, don't mean they're not doing it. So they would pay young, very teeny bopper girls, give them 1,000 pairs of underwear, and tell them just to pull it on, take it off, and put it in this bag, and we're going to pay you huge amounts of money. Right there, getting big money for doing it. Nuclear plant. So that's a disgusting society. I don't care what anybody says. That makes me sick to my guts just thinking about it. Nuclear plant faces shutdown over tax on windfall. This is fear-mongering from EDF in United Kingdom. United Kingdom propaganda machine is freaking out because a couple of days ago it came into effect that because they're raising prices by claiming, inflation, which is artificially induced, right? It was done on purpose. The war is a false flag in Ukraine. Just ask the NATO countries what the inflation is doing to them, and you'll appreciate the harm. It's a war against all the NATO countries, all United Nation countries, but not Russia. No one's attacking Russia. Nobody's over in Russia dropping bombs, blowing up apartment buildings. Nuclear plant faces shutdown over tax on windfall. So the price has gone so crazy, the government wants to claw back some of the money. Not drop the prices, not make, place a cap on how much you can charge. There's no cap on how much you can charge. The cap is on how much you can make a profit from. The rest of it has to be paid into the government. The government is going to take it and give it back to the people that were fleeced. So the best thing to do is not drive the price through the ceiling, right? No, keep driving it up. We don't care. We're going to claw back a percentage of it after 75%, and we're going to give back to the victims so that they don't rebel against us. It's absurd. I mean, it's absurd. Rather than put a cap on it. No, you can go as high as you want, and that, we're going to give some of the money back. So you fleece them all you want. We don't care about that. And other countries are doing the exact same thing, right? Australia, case in point, and New Zealand. Nuclear plants face shutdown over tax on windfall. EDF warns it may be forced to shut down 2 nuclear power stations. But those 2 nuclear power stations that they're talking about are decrepit. It would cost them a fortune to keep them, to bring them up to code to continue to run for a few more years. But they're trying to claim that the windfall tax is threatening. But the windfall taxes, they're making so much money, there's no incentive to claw back, right? How are you going to get the power industry to roll back the prices. Say the war ends tomorrow in Ukraine. How are you going to get the nuclear and the gas, oil, coal industries to stop making massive profits? You think they're really going to give that up? No. The war in Ukraine is a war in Ukraine. It's a war with NATO supplying Ukraine, because Ukraine would have been conquered a long time ago, and Russia flattening Ukraine. Nobody's attacking Russia. Russia sells its commodities to somebody else. Shelling damaged backup power lines. The power lines that are coming into the plants, so each nuclear power plant has multiple lines dedicated to the plant from 2 dedicated gas, oil, and coal plants, and that's all they do is feed the nuclear power plants on each site. They each have 2 dedicated gas, oil, and coal plants. They can't run on their own power. But they do have what's known as a backup power line from another source in case the 2 main ones come offline, because they don't want it to melt down. That'll give the industry a black eye. And so when the International Atomic Energy Agency says something, you should always be... Now, Zaporia, I can't even pronounce it. I couldn't care less. I don't speak Ukrainian. I'm not going to pretend I can. But look at it. It's surrounded by farms. So they show you this they show you this picture. But when you look on the other side of the river, this is what it looks like looking across. And that's what it's actually like. Surrounded by farms. So where's that wind eventually going to blow? Across all those farms, right? Solar power can offer a superior alternative to nuclear fission for generating oxygen on the moon. How come they haven't gone back to the moon in over 40 years? What's that all about? Do you know how many meteorites have landed on the moon? And yet they're shooting satellites, tens of millions of miles away, landing on a meteorite rather, to get samples and then bring it back to Earth, rather than go up to the moon, get some samples and bring it back to Earth. And so now they're claiming they're going to go back to the moon. And so what? How come China and India and other countries, Canada, haven't gone to the moon? Why did they waste all this time on the so-called space station? Why did the flight that they claim, they sent up a remote control system to circle the moon but not go to the moon? Right? So now they're showing them mining on the moon, but why weren't they doing this 40 years ago? The technology for the computers, they needed a city block for a computer, that now you have more computing power in your Apple Watch. So there's no excuses, is what I'm saying, right? And their manufacturing technology is 100,000 times more better. And they can't... It's just absurd anyway. Howard and the military is going to take it over, put nuclear weapons or even worse up there. Howard ministers considered extinguishing the natives' titles of a South Australia site earmarked for the nuclear waste dump. So they took a prime farmland in Australia. They excluded the natives, who owns the title to it, in voting. They divided the community by giving money to one side of the community and ostracizing the other side of the community, which was anti-nuclear. And then the vote passed barely in favor, and they filled the propaganda of the people, like the Royal Commission in the early 2010s, where they brought in all the nuclear apologists to brainwash the population before they had a referendum. Among the 300 or something people that didn't know nothing about nuclear, gave them a crash course on propaganda, and then claimed that they were able to make a decision that affects the whole planet and the continent and the country for millions of years. Like, they always do this, but why did they go to a farmland? Why don't they just go somewhere else where there's not going to be a big fight? Why use prime farmland and want people to actively keep farming around the land? Why are they all surrounded, all the nuclear power plants surrounded by farms? Why are they going to go so far as to take away the rights of the natives, period, who own the land, take that title away from them so that they can have a nuclear dump? You know, and the nuclear dump is for the hospital waste. And the stuff they're injecting in people is so lethal they got to bury it in a deep geological repository for millions of years. So how the fuck is that safe to put in a human or a child, for God's sakes? Excuse the language. How? How does that actually work? No, the industry is just goblins. And devoid is the only thing that they're actually good at. They're not good at actual being anything close to a human for some reason. They're completely dysfunctional when it comes to being an actual steward or a human. It's an absurd story. France's nuclear headache leaves Macron on the brink of rationing electricity. Rationing electricity. Their reactors are very old and decrepit and embrittled from decades of neutron bombardments. They didn't build anything to replace it. They waited for everything to start breaking down and said they're going to have a nuclear renaissance. But yet they can't even build the reactors, which is the EDF, the government of France. They can't even build the reactors that they've been toying with, that are decades over past their due date and 4 times the price they originally. It's just a complete robbery of every one of your senses when it comes to these people. And now they're going to have to ration out in the winter because they refuse to build something to replace it. Otherwise, if they build something to replace it, that means they got to shut it off, see? So they decide, even though the money is paid in advance by the ratepayers, they'll blow the money and say they don't got money, they need to get bailed out to keep the disease factories up and running. And all the nuclear power plants in France are surrounded by farms. No, Iran nuclear deal is not yet dead, and Russia's helping Iran go nuclear. Yeah, Russia's helping everybody go nuclear, but it doesn't have the manpower or the supply network, and they're so far behind schedule. They do all the basics. Russia's going to pay for it. Russia's going to give them all the fuel. Those laws are running out. This legend stems from Operation Plum Bob, a series of nuclear tests conducted in 1957. And like Snopes.com are the official apologists for the military-industrial complex, for the disease factories, for the pharmaceutical industries. And if you go look at the people that own Snopes.com, these are actual just zeros, and they're lunatics on top of that. Cape Cod Salties hold a forum on Holtec plan to dump radioactive water in the Cape Cod Bay. To dump radioactive water in the Cape Cod Bay. This is from the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Plant that's closed down. It still has fuel on the site, fuel and pool. Now they're getting the fuel out of the pool in the so-called dry cast. And the water that's left over, they want to dump it in the ocean because it's normal. That's what they do every day. And they evaporate 120,000 liters a day out of the pools. But the population is not aware of that. And so they've been hoodwinking the population by claiming that this is the only emissions from this site. The emissions are constant because the fuel pools are hemorrhaging about 120,000 liters every day for decades and decades and decades into their environment. They're just not aware of it. And they got them hoodwinked, but they got themselves now on a fence with one leg, and the population is starting to pay attention. So India's got a new Atomic Energy Regulatory Board boss, and his whole history is being a moron for the nuclear industry. He hasn't got a single ounce of credibility. He's got an amazing amount of education and degrees, But his job resume, and he even went to a government university on top of that, his job resume is the resume of a monster. Not somebody you want to admire, not somebody you want for a friend. Algerian president says France must get rid of its colonizer complex. Yeah, it's been going on for over 100 years. I mean, they polluted the entire French Polynesian population with multiple detonations of nuclear weapons over several decades. It's absurd. And what they done to the Niger, they destroyed the country, Niger, because Niger has a rich uranium, a huge, very pure uranium veins. And so they went down and mined that. That's where they got the cheap uranium. But to get cheap uranium, they had to displace millions of women and children in the starving Mediterranean. Make them sick and starve them, and that's what they done. It makes an amazing case. New investments in natural gas and nuclear power. New investments in natural gas. The energy debate has morphed into a political correct, vicious circle in which critical voices are dogmatically vilified. That would be me, of course. You can see the censorship tonight. 22 viewers on a show I've been doing for a decade. And currently we've been going for an hour and 40 minutes. I've never seen low numbers like that in my life. Now, the numbers are artificially deflated, right? There's obviously... The only people that watch these kinds of programs, unfortunately, are the very, very good-natured but hardcore people. And, you know, every day it's a whole new batch of news. It's not like I'm telling the same story every day, despite the fact they typically are. But it's this constant batch each day in 24-hour news cycle that we cover. So it's quite interesting in one sense, right? And, you know, they're always telling what their next plans are, and we're coming out and crushing their propaganda. And with fossil investments were officially banned at the climate summit at the Constipated Party 26 a year ago in Scotland. Think about that. These people, not a referendum in your countries, but a bunch of government employees that works for you went to the Constipated Party, Conference of Parties from the United Nations, and pledged that the countries, so these are claiming to be the kings of the countries, each country, and queens of each country, and that they're going to make the decision. This is not a decision for the countries to make. This is a decision for United Nations to make. Think about the significance of that. And we covered United Nations quite a lot this year during their Conference Party 27. And we never seen the word geothermal a single time. Nuclear power plant, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, goes into short standstill. That's in Germany. They're going to have to do a bunch of work on it to keep it open until April of this year. So, you know, it's January, February, March, April. So they got to close it down, spend millions on it so that they can keep it open for another 3 months. Because that's the extension. But remember when they finally gave in and said they'd keep it open for another 3 months? The disgusting media put out so much propaganda claiming that Germany, see, there's a nuclear renaissance. Germany's going to keep their plants open. Some of them even admitted way down in the story it's only until April. It's not a nuclear renaissance when you keep plants open. The last 3 out of 30 open. Look in the background of this disease factory. What do you see? Right up to the side of the power plant, farm after farm after farm after farm. And fresh water. One thing nuclear is good at is destroying all the species in humanity. It likes poisoning you at your supermarkets. In fact, almost all nuclear power plants worldwide are surrounded by farms. Maybe that's why there's only 22 people on my show showing, despite the fact that, you know, there's going to be more. Desperation, right? The censorship of me is the ultimate compliment. It's not like I'm going away. Not like I'm going to be giving up anytime soon. Nuclear enjoys revival as the public and private funding pours in. See, that's completely dishonest. Last year and the year before is 100% proof. Last year was 291 gigawatts of renewables was added, but only 0.4 gigawatts of nuclear power. Almost 600 times more renewable than nuclear. How is that a renaissance? Is that proof that there is no nuclear power renaissance? It looks like it got spammed out of existence tonight, 26%. They're really good at spamming me, right? The nuclear industry. They're notorious at spamming me. And so their alleged nuclear revival, nuclear renaissance, and they're showing you Diablo Canyon, which can't stay open that much longer. It was supposed to close in another 3 years, and they're going to give it $1 billion. Do you got any idea how far $1 billion goes at one of these disease factories? Not very far at all. And all they done was stole the money. There is no nuclear renaissance. And that, talking private Monday, they're talking $6 billion. Is not a nuclear renaissance. You can't build a reactor for $6 billion, let alone have a renaissance. The return of nuclear power. Again, this is desperation. This is not a factual fact. Right? The statistics from the International Energy Agency last year clearly shows it's not a nuclear renaissance. 291 gigawatts of renewables versus 0.4 gigawatts of nuclear is not a renaissance. That's dive bombing for nuclear. Podcast focus on uranium plus Indian nuclear history and a 2023 look ahead. I haven't listened to the podcast yet. It's from World Nuclear News. It's extraordinary for them to put their name on an article. And so anybody that's not going to sign off on it that's in this kind of position, then why would you trust them, right? And they got Sama Bilabo Y. Leon, which is the president, the governor general, I guess, the president of the World Nuclear Association, And since she's been there, the industry fell apart. So thank you, Sama. You're doing such a great job. Chalk River Lab is working on new carbon-free... Like, why would you put the words carbon-free fuel in the headline? We're seeing that a lot lately, right? Not necessarily carbon-free fuel, but carbon-free nuclear in the actual headline. This is desperation. They're not going to win any battles, and people are not freaking stupid. When they see that repeatedly, they're saying to themselves, oh, the industry is falling apart. They're not saying it's carbon-free, thank goodness. Nobody actually believes them. They don't even believe themselves. And Nick Hawker, he's just trying to hawk a fusion stocks. They don't got a fusion reactor in pipeline. This is pure speculation. And he's sucked up a lot of money. And they got him up as if he's some kind of poster child. He's a poster child for a Ponzi scheme is what he actually is. Chalk River, of course, ends up running all the way down to the Great Lakes, the biggest freshwater repository in the Northern Hemisphere. One great big disease factory. It's the site of the world's first official nuclear meltdown. There's probably more that we don't know about. The industry is extremely good at being deceitful and dishonest. It's exceptionally good, and it can't exist unless it does that. How safe is the Ottawa River from nuclear waste? Well, it's not. It's already polluted. There is no safe in nuclear. British mini nuclear reactor firm plans a $1 billion fundraiser, which is more money than they allocated to Sizewell C. They don't even got anything. They don't even got a design in. They're saying they want to look ahead. So they're going to need the money in the future, so they're going to have a fundraiser. Like, they only... 90% of the money, particularly in the startups, is administration. They're just robbing. They're just gluttons. They're just grabbing what they can before it falls apart. Right? There's no actual there is no nuclear renaissance, neither for large reactors, experimental reactors, or the fabled unicorn small modular reactors. There is no nuclear renaissance. Lawmaker slams the IAEA political approach. The IAEA couldn't, at the time of Iran, the IAEA couldn't care less. Lakes College graduate presents a paper to the international conference. So a whole bunch of nuclear experts got together. And she gave a presentation on nuclear, how to make it more appealing and better and everything else. And so they showed two different pictures of her. Neither one of them they would have took because she got two different hairstyles, two different hair colors. So when I put the two pictures together, they're both the same girl, but they got different hair colors. She's like, it's the industry's just vaporware, right? It's a Ponzi scam. So we raised, and I'll show you what I bought with the money we raised over Christmas here in a minute. I got to look at the little tiny computer now. I got to wear my glasses. My eyesight's good. It's just not good for a little tiny screen. Where did I go? I just want to make sure the people who donated, I acknowledge it. Michael N. donated $100 and Ronald E. donated $25. And I'll play a little video I shot a couple of hours ago of what I bought with it. They're kind of self-explanatory. Just so you can kind of wrap your mind around, because we don't have a toolbox. But because we raised the extra money on the weekend, I went out and bought this. And let me just play it anyway. So this is January the 1st, the first day of January. We're going to do a show in about 30 minutes. Forgot to shoot a video. This is what I bought it. The money was donated during Christmas. We bought an amazing toolbox and a cantilever toolbox. These things are extremely cool. And they fold right up. They fold right up. And so when the cantilever open, you can see. And so thank you everybody that donated. I'm absolutely amazed. Very humble. Thank you. Take care. Yeah, no, that was awesome. Thank you everybody. And those things are, I do need to get the cabinet. The cabinet's like, they're on sale until the 4th for $350 or something. And normally they're around $500 or $600, but I'm not really worried about it. We got a decent toolbox, so that's a huge deal. And then we got the cantilever toolbox, so you can throw all the tools you need and go out to the project. And
maybe worse than thought. Studies from last year indicate that radioactive water will contaminate the entire Pacific Ocean in just 6 years. Kim Min-ji reports.
And I didn't mean to play that. So to contaminate the entire Pacific in 3 years. This was a German study. But anyway, I'm pretty sure we got most of things covered tonight. Well, we got all the stories for 2022 officially covered. We are doing a recap. I'm not sure. I might just jump into that for the rest of the week. And the next show will be covering April of 2022. And they're great, that recap of 2022, because you're getting 10 shows, 20 hours of news in about 3 hours. So they're viciously hard to do. There's a lot of work to put it all together. But otherwise, it goes down the rabbit hole. And, you know, I struggle with what to do about this because I don't like that. It needs to be acknowledged. And when you do it in a short period like I'm doing, you get each show, all of a sudden you get 2 weeks of the 24-hour news cycle each day. And so all of a sudden you're starting to see all these patterns. And the nuclear industry is terrified of anything with patterns. Because the nuclear industry really doesn't have anything to be proud of, right? They don't have any redeeming qualities. And their whole ideology is predicated upon deceit and deception and misrepresentation. So we got a poll, we'll close the poll off, kill the poll off. With 291 gigawatts of renewables and only 0.4 gigawatts of nuclear power added in 2021, is that proof there's no nuclear renaissance? Maybe I'll do that poll tomorrow on the Moral Show. I screwed up the poll tonight. I got called out for it, thank goodness, because that's the only way you can. Do you see how great a debate can be? I was forced to admit that I'm wrong. Not forced. I don't mind admitting that when I'm wrong. And years ago, we encouraged people, right, if I made a mistake, to let me know. And then the trolls would come in and would say, no, it's like a banana, and it's like a potato chip, and it's like walking in the sunshine. It's like getting on an airplane. It's like sleeping next to somebody. This is pure propaganda. And the media has done that to you and your loved ones for 80 years. At what point should you say no, I wonder? At what point? Well, I don't have to tell you because you know the answer. You're not naive and you're not gullible. Phenogen, Vast Thinker, Richard McCann. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Patrick, Nick Moulton. I know Stephen Young is out there somewhere. Kevin Blanche. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. I hope you had a great Christmas and New Year's. I know some of you didn't. I'm just looking for any names to shout out. Dana Nasana. Hi, Dana. Happy 2023, folks. This is day one. It's almost midnight here. I remind people, please don't call me after midnight. I gotta have a life too, right? I'm not going anywhere. Patrick, James Lucet. Hi, everybody. Thank you, everybody. I might do a fundraiser tomorrow show. I like to get the cabinet. It's on sale. We got to get it at some point, and we need it, so I'm tired of trying. It's time to do something. If they didn't destroy my site last year, we would have had it, right? Timothy Martin, I had 24,200 subscribers for 4 years. Never had an extra one or one less. I had 24,200 exactly for 4 years. Never lost a subscriber or gained a subscriber. That's not censorship, is it? Monday. I should put my glasses on. I'm trying to read the little screen down here for the external. Another Gmail. I feel better I've done this show tonight anyway. Paul Tippy. Jeffrey Brown. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Again, that's my fourth time saying that tonight. That means I'm in a good mood, I think. I'm really happy we got the toolboxes. You wouldn't believe the mess I got, right? Chelsea, MC. Hi, Chelsea. We've got Skype for just so you can talk tonight. So that was Chelsea that called in, right? Skawigla, which I have such a hard problem with that name, eh? Jeff Poor. Well, we did get lots of people here. We just got over-censored on the numbers. The terrible small numbers again. And I apologize. I'm doing everything I can. Yes, horrifying how few are allowed to come to my site. I'm censored off the planet for being a good person, not for being a bad person. If I was a bad person, I'd have hundreds of thousands on her by now. That's all I got. That's every ounce of energy I got left in me. I made it through tonight. We'll see everybody tomorrow. Who knows what time. I'm going to be doing a 3-hour recap. It's hardcore. I could very well show up tomorrow afternoon, my time. I don't put anything above me. We got to get through it, and the only way we're going to get through it is just to go ahead and bash my head every day and get through it. Good night, everybody. Take care. I'll see everybody soon enough. If you make it this far, don't forget to give us a thumbs up, folks. Have a great night. We'll see everybody tomorrow. Take care.